So there is a tool out there right now that could reduce the world carbon by 0.5%, or pretty much what the UK generates in the entire year. So we could make the UK zero carbon.
It's the intangible bits around, okay, well, what's the mental health of that person? Does that person go home at the end of the day thinking, really love my job and I can't wait to come back tomorrow to that?
You should be making your employees' lives better.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be coming to work and going, look, you need to chase my profit because I need a new Ferrari, I need a new Porsche.
And then a natural disaster happens, it's like, well, I've said I've done it now, so we'll just move on. No one's going to pull me up.
So what should a business owner do then? If they're sat here listening to this thinking, actually, yeah, you're right, I should do more. Hi, I'm Steve. I'm the digital director at Spectrum Group. Spectrum Group's mission in life is to unlock the potential of your people. Welcome to today's podcast. As ever, I'm joined by John and Neil. I'm also joined by a very special guest, Rich Kenny. Rich is the Sustainability and Research Director at Techbuyer. He's also the founder of a company called Interact, which you're going to hear a lot more about in the podcast. He's hugely passionate about sustainability and really knowledgeable. He advises the government. He also seems to advise every other blue chip company that you can think of. So please like, share, follow, subscribe. And with all that said, welcome to Tomorrow's Workplace Today. Welcome today to Rich Kenny.
Hello.
Who I'm just going to give the floor to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, what you're passionate about.
Yeah, cool. My name's Rich. I'm the Research and Sustainability Director at Techbuyer, and I run one of our sister companies called Interact, which is a greentech machine learning startup. Okay. So sustainability is very much embedded in everything we do as those two businesses, and as a person, that's very much crucially important to what I do.
Okay.
So that goes back to being sort of like a little kid. Always been wanting to drive this sort of stuff forward. When I went to university in the end, I ended up doing poverty alleviation through economics. So focusing on like pro-poor growth and economic development through welfare. So like right from being tiny, that's been very much my focus, is applying business solutions to the world's problems. Amazing. Rather than the other way around, which is the businesses causing the world's problems.
So introduce us to the two businesses. So Techbuyer, first of all, who they are, what they do.
Yeah, so Techbuyer are enterprise and general IT now, I suppose. Refurbishment specialists. So we specialize in refurbishment and remanufacture of primarily server storage and networking.
Okay.
So that's basically giving second life or helping product life extension. The reason behind that is it tends to be much more cost effective for businesses, and environmentally it's incredible because there's no embodied carbon cost in what you've got. There's a small amount of scope 2 carbon in regards to the remanufacturing process, but fundamentally that technology is incredibly usable for multiple years. And what we do is make sure that it gets its full product life rather than just a 3-year and then chuck, which is traditionally what enterprises look at.
So how much of that market is currently refurbished versus new? Are you a kind of niche player in that market, or is that becoming the norm?
I think we're pretty good in the refurbishment market in that space. I think we're like not one of the biggest, but we're massively well regarded, and we punch well above our weight in regards to the research we do, because a lot of what we do around Techbuyer is understanding and furthering the circular economy. So rather than it just being like a good way to reduce costs, we're very much about educating the workforce, educating the marketplace, and educating the wider world on the benefits of technology. Okay. And how you adequately do product life extension, how you do it properly. I think sort of 6 or 7 years ago, refurbishment was like cowboys. Do you know what I mean? It's like, great, someone's taken some stuff out of somewhere, I can probably make 20 quid on selling it somewhere else. Now it's about, well, is this probably the best way to actually use our equipment? And I think it is.
Wow.
So what you have to do is you have to fight against the big OEMs and all these other people who are saying, always buy new, always buy new. And there's a time and a place for new. You know, we sell new as well because sometimes it's bang on. But there's a whole raft of this equipment that's got such a worthwhile product life left that just really gets tossed away, and it contributes to those mountains of e-waste that we hear about a lot in the news.
Okay.
So that's our business, and I run the research and sustainability teams because we're grant funded by the UK Research Institute. We're grant funded by Interreg. We've got funding from Innovate UK because we actually have sort of doctors of aeronautical engineering working for us that are working on quite intense and quite in-depth research that are going to be furthering the circular economy and furthering the impact of refurbishment on our planet. So we're actually very well funded as a part of the business to do stuff that even the manufacturers aren't doing.
Amazing. Okay, and I can see you're wearing an Interact hoodie as well. So talk to us about Interact.
So we started a knowledge transfer partnership with Innovate UK and the University of East London in 2019. So a knowledge transfer partnership is where you tie up with education, industry, and UK PLC, innovation-based projects, and you create something the world's never seen before. So our project was to basically look at the impact of refurbishment on the data center sector, identify payback points, whether it's good, what good refurbishment looks like, and fundamentally create a scientific and economic model for refurbishment that was effective. During that, we were benchmarking loads of servers using sort of industry benchmarking tools, and we unequivocally disproved Moore's law of computing as part of this research project. So Moore's law is kind of a fundamental law of computing that says that every 2 years you'll either halve in size or double performance, basically. And we disproved that for CPU architecture in 2015, and we published in the IEEE Journal of Sustainable Computing that research as part of that KTP. What that meant is we could completely reanalyze the buy every 2 years to refresh and get the most, because instead of having transformational gains of 100% better, these new architectures are like 13% better, but actually use quite a bit more energy.
So what's triggered Moore's law? Has it been a gradual decline off that, or has it been something that's...
Do you know what's really... The pinpointed date is like 2014, 2015 in CPU architecture. So there's a defined date where you see idle power increase and actual top-end performance increase, but incrementally. So they've got worse at doing nothing, where servers spend quite a lot of time doing nothing. And they've only got a little bit better at doing something. Right. And it could be elements of dark silicon on the chip. It could be basically the architecture of how you build a CPU. It could be that you can't fit any more transistors and have them all fire because silicon has a finite amount of energy it can produce. It could be the density of cores that means that they can't all, do what they need to do as effectively as they could do. So there's quite a lot of stuff that plays into it. And I'm not entirely sure the exact specifics of that. What I am sure is the effects. Wow. And that hasn't come back out the other end yet. So people always say, yeah, but Moore's law will restart again. You go, probably we might move to like 2 nanometer technologies that completely change the way we do it. We might architecture CPUs on graphene rather than silicon. These are all hypotheticals, but what I can tell you is it can't be an immutable law if it stops having an effect for 7 or 10 years.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a law of computing that just had a 10-year break. It's not a law then, is it? It's kind of an observed trend that's restarted again. So the reason this is kind of spraffing on about this is that while we were doing this analysis, we put it all into a machine learning model to then be able to predict basically the energy efficiency, impact, and performance of any server, of any brand, generation, model, configuration, anything. And we spent 3 years benchmarking and providing this data set to build this tool. And that tool is now Interact. It's part one of the tools in our business that we've launched. And so Interact is I'm going to use the word green tech because it's fundamentally about finding optimal ways to refresh hardware, looking at carbon on scope 2, embodied carbon on scope 3, energy efficiency, and it looks at stuff like carbon intensity metrics of where you're generating the power, where it sits on what grids, the servers you're using. We then benchmark their performance. That's never been done before. No one's ever been able to do that. So we can comprehensively go into a data center and say, right, looking at all your IT equipment, we can tell you can reduce energy by 80% running the same utilization on the same level of performance. So we can save you massive amounts of carbon, massive amounts of energy, massive amounts of cost. Environmentally, if you did that for every data center in the world and you ran that analysis, you could reduce global carbon by 0.5%. So 0.5% of the world's carbon you could eradicate in wastage through IT and data centers. That's a monstrous amount. I mean, we're talking about the energy that the UK uses. So you could make the UK zero carbon by optimizing data centers because they're such high energy users.
Amazing. And most businesses that we speak to now have a sustainability policy of some sort. From your experience, is that something that they're putting into practice, that they actually care about, or is it a box ticking exercise to pass some sort of accreditation?
Accreditation is a tricky one. Let's not talk about that because I think all the sustainability accreditations that are out there are absolute garbage because there isn't anything out there that actually
is meaningful.
Yeah, like you have the sort of the PAS ones, you have like ISOs like 14001 and they're a really good step. Don't get me wrong. It's like you've got an ISO 14001. That means that you care about the environment, right? But actually what it means is you have a plan in place to reduce kind of what you're doing. So like, we're a recycling business. We're going to recycle more than we scrap. Nice one, mate. That's really good. And it's admirable that you're doing something, but that's not really a framework, is it? Because you're just telling me and someone comes in and looks at my business and goes, so what do you do? We don't set fire to tires in the garden. Right, nice one, mate. You're environmentally solid business. Do you know what I mean? It's the same with the PAS 2060 stuff, where you go, yeah, we're pretty good and we've got a plan to net zero. But the people that are auditing the plans, they ain't got a clue either. There's been this boom in environmental consultants. And I'm sitting there thinking, where have you guys come from? Because we've been talking about this for 15 years and everyone ignored us for 10. 5 years ago, people started saying, you know what you're talking about. Why don't you advise government on this? Which we do. And so if me and my team and our business on the whole are ones that are advising international governments on this, and I don't recognize any of these people who are providing any of this sort of surety that people are doing it right, where has that come from? You know, it's like, oh, someone's done a master's, they've done a 1-year course, and now they're going to advise, you know, Suzuki on how to completely reduce and completely transform its impact on the environment. I don't think so. Like, I don't think that's really very realistic.
So what should the government be doing then, or bodies be doing to give that some teeth to make sure that businesses are kind of
Well, we've got some new sort of, in the UK, we've got some sort of new reporting guidelines. So we've got SECR, Streamlined Energy Carbon Reporting, and that targets certain size businesses to report on Scope 1 and Scope 2. But the biggest part of the environmental impact on any business is going to be at Scope 3. So Scope 1 is direct emissions. That's like, you know, the cars you drive and the petrol it generates. Scope 2 is sort of your energy, so powering the building, keeping the lights on and running your processes. Scope 3 is your supply chain. And everything is the supply chain. So, for example, if I use a logistics company for Techbuyer, which we do, none of that transport of our goods worldwide, which is probably our largest carbon footprint, is covered by SECR, because that isn't Scope 1 because it's not our vans, and it's, you know, DHL, DPD, FedEx, whoever it is.
Yeah.
That's their Scope 1, but it's our Scope 3. And SECR says I don't need to report on that legally. So the biggest part of carbon in my business, for me to comply with SECR legislation, which is the only one that really matters right now, I'd have to report that. If I'm a data center or a technology business, if I have servers on premise, it's Scope 2. So if I'm using my own servers, it's that energy. If I go to cloud, it's technically Scope 3. It's someone else's problem. So I can literally shift the entire burden of my responsibility and my entire sustainability out of reporting by just going, I'm just going to use this partner.
I've seen that with some of the food manufacturers that we've got. That we had one of our largest ones ask us about, plastic tax, and they've got to now. Obviously, that's coming to pay it now. So it's like, how do we collect all this information? How do we gather all this information? How do we calculate it all? And then some of them were, when we were talking to these different companies, they were taking a viewpoint exactly like what you're saying. They were saying, "Oh, that's not my issue. It's my logistics company. They've got to report on that, or we'll do this bit, or actually, we'll." And then whereas the others were taking a different viewpoint, they wanted to own it and actually, manage it right through.
We always say you can't manage what you can't measure. And if you basically shift the entire responsibility of your environmental reporting on somebody else, you're taking their best guesses. That I don't think is robust, personally. I mean, for me, it's like if someone said, do you know how much energy your business uses? And I go, yep, I've got the bills. I know what the grid intensity looks like. I know that to generate this much performance costs this much power because I got the reports and that's what I've been charged for. If they say, you know, how are you doing environmentally? Awesome, mate. Everything goes to cloud and cloud's really effective. Yeah. In a lot of cases, it is, by the way. Like, it's fantastic. But if you don't know, you don't know. Yeah. What are you doing to improve your efficiency? Nothing. I've given it to someone else. It's their problem. Well, that's not robust.
So is that changing then? When is Scope 3 going to come into force?
Well, they encourage it. They encourage you to report on your Scope 3. And that's one of those things. It's encouraged.
Exactly.
Like, please report on your Scope 3. And it's like, okay, wicked. I'll do that. So I guess I need to speak to everybody who supplies everything to my business worldwide, and they better have a mechanism to report on what they do. And it's just not realistic. We talk about embodied cost in stuff. So in Scope 3 carbon, the embodied carbon of creating an asset, and I'll use a server because it's a really easy mechanism for me to transpose. So within that server, there is an amount of energy required to make it, right? To refine the minerals, to pull the stuff out of the ground, to then assemble it, collate it and ship it, right? There's a huge part of that. So they reckon that a server, your average server, is like a ton of carbon embodied. Great, okay. Whose best guess is that? Yeah. So you're honestly telling me that for that server, you know how hard it was to mine the materials and pull the gold, palladium, neodymium, tantalum, all these raw materials that you pulled out of Chile and out of DRC and out of New Mexico. You pulled all this stuff out of the ground, and you're telling me you know what it took to mine the fractional components of the critical raw materials that sit within information technology. You know what the smelting process was for the aluminium that went into it. You know about the plastics and what proportion of that was recycled, remanufactured, and reincubated. You know what it cost to transport it via plane or train or boat. You don't know. To go from Chile to be assembled in China, to then be shipped to America, to then to be sold in the UK. And you're telling me you know the entire logistics chain of what that cost and the carbon intensity of moving those materials and assembling them and creating them. You don't. So it's a best guess, right? So you're saying we encourage you to report on Scope 3. Great. Well, when I go to a supplier and go, what's in your hardware? And they go, I haven't got a clue, mate. And you go, fair enough, because you don't.
So will we ever?
I think we're starting to develop technology to track this stuff. I think we're doing better. Will we ever with absolute certainty? No, but I think we'll take good enough, I think. And that's what we have to say. We have to say what's good enough, what's feasible, what's practical. I look at it because I run some of the compliance teams in our business of what is effective compliance as far as we can go to still run a profitable business. Because if you go to the nth degree on some of these things, it can make your business quite difficult to run. So what is good what is great and what is perfect. And it's one of those, great is the enemy of good, right? You can get 95% there with 5% effort, but to get that other 5%,
diminishing returns.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think we need to identify when we're hitting diminishing returns on this, but encourage that we need to get to that point and not just someone go, it's pretty hard, mate. Like we probably don't know. You go, well, how hard have you tried? Because it is a big important part of, not setting the world on fire is knowing what we buy and how we consume and why we consume. And, I think that's a huge piece of it. The other piece is with governments, which was actually a question about 45 minutes ago before I went off on one, was around legislation and how do you incentivize that? And we're seeing, SECR and ESOS in the UK. I don't know if you saw this recently, but the European government's just mandated a single charger for electronics equipment, so USB-Cs, to remove Apple's Thunderbolt and all the rest of it. And you go, there's a massive pushback from Apple who fought this viciously in court to say, well, no, we need these chargers. You go, but why? Like, if we have a standardized technology, you can literally remove a ton of e-waste, like a million tons of e-waste. All that stuff doesn't need to be mined, created, or generated. We don't need to do any of that waste. And I mean, there's a consumer benefit of saving the money, right? Not buying 2 chargers. But I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like I'm plugging stuff in at home and I need 6 different chargers. Yeah. And I'm going, I need 6 different chargers to charge electronics that kind of all have the same functions. Now, I work in research. I know that's patently absurd, that you don't need those mechanisms. Those aren't necessary. So why have we done that? And it's to build a reliance on that technology so that the actual sunk cost of investing in a manufacturer stays with you. So I'm an Apple guy. I'm not, by the way, but I'm an Apple guy. I only use Apple, which means I have an Apple charger, and that means it charges all my Apple things, and that's great. Go and buy a Samsung. Well, yeah, but I'd have to have a charger, and it doesn't really have the same connectivity stuff. And actually, it's quite difficult to move to Samsung. And
you're tied in that ecosystem.
Yeah, there's a thing there where you go, you've actually kind of held me hostage a little bit there, really, haven't you? So that, and but the EU's come in and said, don't do that. That's naughty. And then they give them 40 months to solve it. And you go, okay, so you've now got, and everyone goes, oh, that's disgraceful. And you go, you've only got 4 years to. Really? Like 4 years?
USB-C, haven't they? Yeah. Move away from Lightning and move it a little bit to USB-C and things like that. But yeah, it's...
and in 4 years, will USB-C be the best?
The amount of cables.
We will have moved on by then.
Honestly, I went on holiday and like I've got a box full of cables and I'm thinking, how many do I need? Exactly that point.
That's it. And this is madness, isn't it? Because I just need one. Because it just needs to be able to take the voltage from the mains, transfer it into a mechanism that we can use for an electronics that's safe and put it into that. But none of these have variable voltage controllers. You're not putting a Thunderbolt in and going, don't worry, it's really good, because actually what that does is trickle charges a certain way that makes it more effective to charge. That's not why we have the cable. It's not an environmentally friendly cable that optimizes the energy output. It's just a preferred mechanism. Yeah, and I just think that's absurd.
So if you were a listener that's a owner of a medium-sized business, their priority is probably making sure that they make a good profit at the end of the year. Why should they care about sustainability as a business owner? What's your kind of argument towards that?
I think break down what sustainability is, and people use sustainability and they mean carbon sometimes, and I think that's really reductive, and that's unfortunately the biggest problem with our government is they say sustainability and they actually mean carbon, and carbon's one minor piece of when I talk about it, I talk about critical raw materials. Even if we're just talking about like the environmental piece, I'm talking critical raw materials, I'm talking about that, but environmental covers education, it covers welfare, it covers social impact, it covers commitment to doing the right thing in the right way, it covers mental health, it covers all these things, and then it also covers the governance aspects of it as well, as in making sure we're doing things right, like not buying human slaves to assemble our goods, for example, which most manufacturers pretty much do, but they don't call it slavery, they just call it a work contract or a 0 hours contract. And we look at that and say, well, what's the benefit of caring about your workforce? And if you change it to that rather than what's the benefit of caring to the environment? Well, we don't all die and my son gets to not live on a planet that's hotter than the sun. There's a huge benefit to looking at the environment. Socially, what's the investment in your people brought you as a business at Spectrum? Because you care about your employees, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, I've just walked around your office. For anyone who hasn't been here, it's a really cool office, by the way. But like, it's a cool office, but people seem pretty happy. Like, I haven't seen anyone smack with a whip to make them move faster, which is normally a good thing.
Pull the whips away when
Did it? It's good. When
the cameras come out.
I appreciate that because it makes my job easier. But the stuff you've got around here, you've got clear spaces. I can see that you've got stuff that's been thought out around how you're laying out the office for comfort and things like that. What's the benefit of that to you as an employer? And that's what I'd ask you, because that's part of sustainability, is the social aspect of how you're looking after your employees. Do you pay them a good wage? Probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like, so why do you pay them a good wage?
So we can keep hold of talented people and. Yeah, and they enjoy working here, and when people enjoy working, they perform better, and it's a cyclical, self-fulfilling thing.
After the customers better, and then they.
I mean, on a personal level for your employees, it's so they can buy food, pay their rent, absolutely. And so there's aspects of that where you go,
quality of life,
as an employer, your responsibility, and I'm not saying this is what you should be doing, I'm just saying what you can do, but you should be making your employees' lives better.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be coming to work and going, look, you need to chase my profit because I need a new Ferrari, or I need a new Porsche. That's the 80s way of looking at things sometimes, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like, your role is to facilitate the CEO making a fat wedge. And it's like, I think we're seeing that transformational change now where people go, do you know what? Like, I could do a million different jobs. I can work wherever I want for whoever I want. So I'm going to work with someone who's got a bit of moral fiber. Now, you need to pay me right because I do need to live. But I'm not so bothered about you having a slide that goes from the top floor to the bottom floor. But I am particularly bothered about you making sure I've got healthcare, and that if I'm having a bit of a meltdown, that someone puts their arm around me and makes sure I'm okay. And it'd be really nice if I wasn't sexually harassed at work. Do you know what I mean? Like, these are the things that would be quite important to me. And it's stupid to have to talk about these things in 2022, but we do because they're still happening. So what I would say is, what's the impact of sustainable on your business? Just on the social side, just focus on the social side. Happy, healthy, responsive, looked after, cared for employees, which means easier to recruit, higher retention, greater levels of happiness, less sick days. There's a list as long as your arm there, just saying, what happens if you pay people right? I don't lose them. Okay, why is not losing someone good? Because good people are actually a valuable resource, and we treat them as not human capital, but as members of our family. Retention is the most important thing you can do in a business because it shows that your culture is strong. And that's for me, that's the big thing. Part of complete culture is about understanding their wants and not just saying, we have a certain culture and you need to align to that. Like, don't look at culture as reductive. Look at it as exploratory, as creative, and as a benefit. At Interact, we've just launched our SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals. They're the UN's SDGs. You pick from one of 17 goals, and you put stuff in place that says you'll report on your performance on these goals. And most big companies are following SDGs because it's a simple framework that's effective to launch. And our ones are focused on carbon reduction, because that's what Interact does. So it's an easy one as a business to say, okay, we want to reduce carbon by 1 million tons of carbon this year, and we can probably do that. But one of our second ones is about gender equality, because in tech, gender is a massive issue. And so this is part of our Articles of Association, that our decision making will be 50% female. So irrespective of how many people I want to hire, decision making must remain 50-50. And in tech, that's quite hard.
What sort of decisions? Because presumably you're making decisions every single day within
So we're
business,
talking directional, strategic, board level decisions. So 50% of our senior management team must be female.
Right.
And that, for me, some people go, well, why are you enforcing that? Surely it's best candidate. And I'm saying, because if someone doesn't force it, it won't be best candidate, because there'll be inherent biases built in that. So if we don't say we need more women in tech, we need more women to do this, and someone goes, yeah, it'll happen naturally. Well, it hasn't. So maybe people need to say, yeah, it's best person for the job, and I agree with that, but you also need to create an environment where they feel supported when they're in that role. So that's easy for us, because for us, it's 60% female. My marketing manager's female, my head of development's female. Like my child environment is female.
Wow.
And why are we better as a business? Because we've got creative, smart people making great decisions that feel empowered and supported by the management. I'm happy to be outnumbered. I don't want to be the only white guy on my team. That's not something I sit there and worry about and go, God, is there other people like me in my business or in our business? I don't care if they're like me. I care if they've got a vision that aligns with mine. But other than that, I really just want them to, be really good people. And so my experience in working in technology for 12 years is that some of the best people I've worked with happen to be female. And so I need to encourage an environment where they can come and do and feel strong and do that.
Are you an anomaly in the market, do you think? Or are you seeing, when you're working with customers, are you finding more and more people kind of joining you on that philosophy?
I see a lot of wonderful women leaders, and I'm seeing more of them. But that might just be the platforms and how that's been presented as opposed to the actual absolute numbers. But in a technology firm, especially something that's like cutting edge, like machine learning, it's a sausage fest. Like, let's be honest about that. Like, you know what I mean? And it's a shame, because my developer I've got, Nora, is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. But she'd get buried in most companies. I'm not saying that, she's not strong and capable. She's incredible. But there's a chance where, because she's quiet and she's a really good thinker, she gets talked over in most businesses, and they would miss a golden opportunity to have an incredible person leading their technical teams. And they won't mean to do it. This is not badness. This is not a conspiracy. This is not the Illuminati saying, keep women down. This is the fact that the board is 90%, in most cases, the board is 90% 50-year-old white male. And so the one woman that's in there is brash and abrasive, and, all these words we put to people that, that we think is suitable. Whereas actually, I've never been called brash. Get called abrasive sometimes. Like, do you know what I mean? But no one would, if I was being strong, I'm being strong. Whereas I've seen plenty of, women fight for the same thing I'm fighting for, and they're disruptive or they're aggressive. You're like, well, if I did it, it's not aggressive, but if she does it, it's aggressive. Yeah. And that's the sort of thing. If we don't build the culture around not putting labels on people like that, we can't build a culture that's focused on social impact. So we can't build a good business as far as I'm concerned. And that's sustainability.
So let's reflect on us a bit. We've got 2 female board members. We've got 2 very, very capable females within our digital team as well. But
and growing.
But I think probably more.
I'm using females, by the way, as one demographic.
Yeah,
I'm putting standing. I'm just going. I'm using gender because in technology, gender's a thing.
Yeah.
More so than it is around race or religion and all this other stuff. Because we actually see quite a lot of developers in developing nations, which are, different to what we would see in the UK and in America, but are doing running incredible startups that are entirely Indian driven, for example. So, and it's not that it's not something that's a consideration, but there is a massive dearth on the female side. So that's something that I think we can address. The other stuff shouldn't be a talking point. It's going to have to be because it's ridiculous. But the other stuff for me, it's kind of like I need to protect one particular demographic here because it's a tricky one in this industry. And that's it's just such a massive waste. It's such a massive waste of talent for people that don't feel comfortable to be awesome. And that's a part of sustainability. And that's what I think sustainability will highlight going forward, is that if you have social policies around this, and you need to, those social policies need to be about running good businesses first.
Hi, I'm just going to jump in for a second just to introduce Spectrum Digital. So Spectrum, we are experts in automation. We work with businesses to first understand your processes and then use technology to automate the processes, ultimately making you more efficient and making lives better for you and your employees. So if you're interested, have a look on the website, download our white papers, watch the videos. We talk a lot about all things automation. That's enough from me. Back into the pod. Sustainability from an automation perspective, then, are we getting clients speaking to us around sustainability? Is that part of the decision-making process when we're talking to them about automation?
Well, I don't know if it's about automation. It's about when we engage with someone. I am actually starting to have those questions around what's your sustainability policy, etc. Now, at some with customers and some with prospective customers. It's like, we're interested in what you can do and how you can help us, but we're also interested in your ethos and your staffing, your environmental,
Yeah, but presumably paper, that's a big part of the sustainability journey, is it? Businesses removing paper from it?
Could be.
Yeah,
I think if we keep on that theme of the culture and setting up a good business, the business owners that I've been speaking to, some of the key points that they've been talking about. One, yes, they're conscious that they're killing trees. Ultimately, they've got boxes of paper and invoices, and they're printing invoices off, and they're thinking there must be a better way. And then ultimately, we've touched on it before, mental health and actually caring about the person that's doing that role. If they're sat there doing mundane things and clicking buttons and freshing file print and then having to shuffle paper to just key information back into it, literally business owners have said, I don't want that person sat there doing that. It must be the most boring thing to do. And really, I want them to be doing something better. They've got more gifts to add value to this business than just sat there shuffling paper.
Make them aspiration, give them that aspiration that actually that isn't going to be your job for the next 25 years. It's actually that's a stepping stone. And actually, if I can give you something that's going to free your time up, that you don't get stuck behind that screen and you can go and do the next level.
There's been instances where I've spoken to MDs, they've got an FD or an accountant that's way qualified, but because of the
everyday,
they're busy and they've been drawn into having to process invoices and things like that and automate basic processes around that. And they're literally thinking, okay, well, that's the investment, but I'm paying that person already to do that. But they're more qualified than they should be, faffing about with that. So again, they are making decisions to introduce technology. And like you say, when we try and look at the business case, yes, we're looking at how much time does it take, how much money you spending pressing print, but then it's the intangible bits around, okay, well, what's the mental health of that person? Does that person go home at the end of the day thinking, really love my job, and I can't wait to come back tomorrow to that pile of invoices. Because I've actually seen it on the flip side. One of my customers specifically, it was a family business, and the owner of the business, was worried about his son. He didn't want to come in and do that job. He was literally to the point where the paper was all over the floor. He was trying to segment it into little piles of, they're my credit card receipts, and they're my ones to do with the delivery note, and that's that over there. And literally the day we turned up to do the audit, he rang in sick because he just was like, I don't want to see any more paper. And his dad was like, yeah, we need to sort this out because it's just not right.
So it's the human element as well. But we are certainly hearing more about sustainability out in the media and the news. You've got a podcast now that you've started around sustainability. Is that right?
So we're doing. So we're just literally just launching it. So it's this Interact Sustainability series, and what we're going to try and do is put a different approach to sustainability forward, and keep them small. We're going to do like 15 minutes sort of thing. So like our first one's on what can the golden age of piracy teach us about social contracts. Stuff like that. So something really interesting where I think what we need is a younger generation to listen to that and go, what the heck does piracy tell us about? And you go, well, actually, they're one of the first socially inclusive organizations. They didn't care about race, gender, any of this sort of stuff. A ship is like a business. So there's a great analogy there in regards to you're all pulling together. Everyone has their job. It's about valuing people. Sailors were highly, highly valued because they're difficult people to train. So what you ended up with is like a navy that then shut down, for example, the coastal Elizabethan area, which led to all these people going, I've got this really, really good job. And it's a bit of an analogy for automation. I've got all these people with a really great set of skills that aren't needed anymore. And what do? So they go and take their skills somewhere else. And that happens to be, across to the new world. But during that, they've got relationships around that. The thing I was mentioning, I won't go too much into it, but like, because I'm worryingly obsessed with pirates due to my 3-year-old loving them as well. But it's looking at things like that can maybe take the conversation from being quite so morally high-handed, something a bit more entertaining. Because the biggest problem we have with, and I'm using sustainability, and I mean, when I say sustainability, I'm covering not just ESG, because what we hear a lot of is like ESG, like CSR used to be like corporate social responsibility. Now we talk about environmental, social, and governance. And it's when you can have like ExxonMobil will be like the most ESG focused business in the world, and you go, you literally pull dead animals from millions of years ago out of the ground and spew them into cars so we can put CO2 in. And it's useful, don't get me wrong, it's a useful business because we need that fuel. But please don't tell me you're the most environmentally focused business in the world. It makes me feel a bit sick.
It's a label, isn't it, that everyone tries to
because what they've got is an effective breastfeeding policy that they've written down somewhere they probably don't enforce. But they say, it's okay to go to these private rooms we've built somewhere because we really care about young mums. And it's like, we don't hire any. So it's great if they turn up and they've got a baby stuck to them, and you're supposed to care about that. You probably don't, but you also don't hire them in the first place because you're seen as too big of a risk. So your policies don't echo your sentiments. So like when we're talking about sustainability, we need to be covering ethos, and it needs to not be I wear my own homemade trousers made out of hemp. It needs to be how do you do this at government level? How do you do sustainability well? How do you focus on what really matters? And that's the key thing. I think that's what I want us to drill down into in the next 2 years is what does good look like and how do we have a template for that? And it starts with education in my mind.
Yeah, because sustainability it's a very high level term, isn't it? It's an umbrella term for lots and lots of things. I think that's what probably business owners find difficult. It's actually in practice, what does that mean to me as a business?
Yeah, and it's super, super hard for businesses. Like they come in with these reports we talked about like earlier on about SECR, ESOS, all this sort of stuff. And basically what happens is some business owner goes, we've just hit threshold for streamline energy and carbon reporting. Accounts team, can you provide all that? And they're like, sorry, do what with what? And it's like, well, you do the company reports, and now we have to have SECR in it. Right, I don't know what that is. I don't know how we even go about that. Right, yeah, but it's a legal requirement now. Well, what do we want to do? All right, well, let's go speak to PwC or E&Y or some other absolute joker of a firm, that a big four, the sort of big fours that can do financial audits on firms and say, yeah, you're really healthy, and then watch the pensions get stolen, a la Debenhams. This is not good due diligence. These firms are not well directed. I spoke to a lot of them, and they're discovering this as well for sustainability. So they've got a track record of looking at your books and saying, you have made money, well done. And this is how much money you've made, and therefore you're an attractive investment. Asking these same firms to do carbon reporting for a lumber mill because they
transform their business.
Yeah, exactly. And you go, and then with ESOS, how are you going to reduce that? Well, we've got these consultants come and tell us. Right, Mr. Consultant, how long have you been working sustainability? Well, I once read a book a week ago, and now because I work at E&Y, it's fine. You can trust me, and it's like you can't.
So what should a business owner do then if they're sat here listening to this, thinking, actually, yeah, you're right, I should do more around sustainability, but I need help. What do they do?
For me, it starts education. You've got to educate. You're going to have to educate around this. Like you have to educate yourself with finance when you're a business owner. Like you have to educate yourself with operations. You're going to have to educate yourself about sustainability.
Okay.
And it can't be one of those things where you go, I'll just take what people tell me. There isn't the body of knowledge available right now for what this looks like. And that's what I'm talking about. We need that advocacy piece covered. Because if I was starting a new business now, they always ask you for a business plan, don't they? Like, so if I want to attract investment, hypothetically, and I don't need money, but what's the first thing someone sits down with you if you go and see a business, a business coach? You've got your business plan. Yeah, we're going to make this much money this year and this much money this year, and then we're going to hire this many people, and then we're going to do some stuff in product development, and that's a business plan. Wicked. What's your environmental plan? What's your sustainability plan? Like, okay, so you know how you're going to make money or hypothetically make money, and it's it's not worth the paper it's not printed on at this point in time. But why are they allowed to leave out that piece? How you look after your workforce going forward? When you grow, how are you going to maintain care of your employees? Why is that not part of the business plan? Like, you want to grow a business? Wicked. How are you going to make sure you take care of your people? How are you not going to plunder the environment to get to your aims? And how are you not going to break the law while you do it?
Seems pretty fundamental stuff, doesn't it?
I think so. I'm not saying, I'm not calling on out on this, by the way, just to be clear. I might sound abrasive. If I was
passionate.
Passionate.
Absolutely, yeah.
If I was a woman, I'd be being aggressive. But why is this not part of corporate education? You're telling me it's important. I think it's important.
I think it's before that, Rich. You were talking education, we're talking corporate education, but my son's just moved into secondary school, and he's got a raft of core subjects. I've not heard him once say, "Oh, we've done something on sustainability or all of the things to do with our environment." That actually, if we teach them early enough, that you mentioned very early on in this pod about get people younger and things like that. Well, if we're not teaching them at that impressionable age, then it's going to take longer. It's going to be harder to get someone to change. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully I'm putting a very pessimistic view forward. Not my view, but a pessimistic view. But actually, a lot of we're talking about phones and USB-Cs and whatever the Apple charger thing is. Should know I've got one, but we were talking about that, and they're already all over gadgetry. They're already my son's way more I like tech, but he's way more au fait with shortcuts and doing this and that. Well, he's at that age, and probably your child's 3. They're at that bit young to start, but maybe no, it's not actually. But
it's not.
but actually, that's what we should be doing. So for me, listening to you passionately talking about this subject, and I'm learning things, being brutally frank. For me, you're now advising the government. I couldn't tell you who the environmental, the sustainability minister was. Don't hear much about them in the press. We hear about all these other things that are going on that don't enrich my life. And it's got to start with education at our children's ages, but it's also got to start with actually there being more prominence within government that actually make it a little bit more, rigid. It's not, because at the moment, if I'm being honest, I've worked for PLCs and I've worked for family-owned businesses. In the main, in some of my other companies, it is absolutely a tick box. I've done this, I've done that, brilliant, that'll go away. All the analogies you used earlier, I'm thinking, I work for a company that's done that.
Do you want the one that gets me, sorry to jump in, the one that gets me, I went to America a couple of weeks ago, and over here, plastic straws, they're just, we'll make them paper. There we go. There's a tick box thing. Over there, massive cups, still got plastic straws. And I'm thinking, I guarantee over there with the amount of fast food chains, they're absolutely hammering that. But just little things like that. We've made one thing, moved it from plastic to paper, and it's like.
But the laugh of that is
it better?
Is the paper recyclable?
Is it recyclable?
Well, you tell me if those big, thick paper straws at McDonald's, apart from the fact you can't drink a milkshake with them. So
there we go. That's my frustration. But on top of that, the interesting thing is they give you a paper straw, but the plastic cup is still the paper cup is still covered by plastic.
But this is the key around the education, the focus, and the knowledge. So we moved away from paper bags when we were in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
You used to have paper bags, right? I remember this. I'm luckily old enough to still remember a little bit of paper bagging. And we moved to plastic bags. And then we got rid of what single-use plastic bags and changed them to these new bags for life, which people still use just once and throw away, but are 10 times denser on plastic. Yeah. The paper straw is a prime example. Like, know a little bit about this because I hate a paper straw. Hate the mouthfeel. So, but I also hated a plastic straw because I don't drink with a straw anyway. But, there's a preference there even if there wasn't.
Yeah.
But how recyclable are those paper straws once they've been used? Because I don't think they are. My understanding was that they require quite a lot more energy to create than the plastic ones. And this is just some of the stuff I've heard. So I need educating on this as well because I'm not clear. But I'm not sure those paper ones are recyclable. So have we done the right thing? I don't.
Yeah,
and
it was a knee-jerk reaction, wasn't it? To kind of
paper's better than plastic because
quick, we'll do something.
Stop putting plastic in the ocean.
David Attenborough said, "Oh, we're putting loads of plastic in the ocean. We better do something." And it was just like, "Hang on, why have you picked the straw?" It was like out of everything.
But actually, so in another life, I worked in print and publishing. So I worked for printing companies that produced magazines, consumer magazines, and your subscribers would get it in the post, and it would come in polythene, and it would have been printed on, etc. And I'm talking 10, 15 years ago, there was this massive thing, right, we're going to biodegradable, poly, if you like. Obviously, it's not poly, but biodegradable coverings for your magazines chucked in it. Yeah. So we've got all this rubbish that, as a reader or whatever, and I'm slightly diversifying where we were, but we just chuck away. So that's been, all the things that's resulted in the trees being chopped down to produce the paper for people to go, not interested, chuck it. Actually, the biodegradable, because it was a tick box exercise, the biodegradable, covering that comes with took about 30 years to degrade. Yeah. If it degraded, because if it got to a certain part in the ground, it didn't degrade anymore. And it was granted with that 10, 15 years ago. So things may have evolved. And I know now recycled paper's being used in that environment. But I suppose while I absolutely admire and love your passion, and like I said, I'm learning things, for me, it's a long journey, isn't it? Because it
is. And it's a global one as well, isn't it? That's the thing. It's not just us.
That's bang on. We look at this like it's in isolation, and it's not, because we're talking about global supply chains. And it horrifies me every time I buy like a little toy for my son. I buy him a lot because I'm a softie. Yeah. But like, I'll buy him, do you know what I mean? Like, I'll buy him like some stupid little thing that was like 80p or something, and we'll get it from like, at the moment he's obsessed with these things called like super things, and they're just like little plastic pieces of rubbish that he's not going to want in a year's time. Yeah. And it's a tiny little manufactured plastic thing that has no secondary life or secondary use. I don't know if it's recyclable, but he's got about 90 of them now. Yeah. And I'm sitting there going like, I'm all about environmentalism, but I still pick him up every time I go to the shop because it makes him happy. Yeah. And I think you multiply that by every child in the world, and I know we're in a fortunate position, so I can afford these 80p things for him. But you multiply that across and go, that's a single instance of a single product at a single time in life that has no secondary value. It's just a consumer-based product, right? What is the impact of all these little microtransactions added up? And that's why you're saying we're focused on who chose straws. Who went, straws. Like, all right. I mean, I saw a thing the other day where they were saying that actually the wear and tear on tyres produces more carbon than petrol. Wow. Like the actual particulates released from rubber burning on our roads produces more than tyres.
Really?
Tyres, produces more than the fuel. That's incredible. And I remember before everyone was like anti-diesel, it was go to diesel, it's better for the environment. And then they went, it's got 10 times the particulate. It's quite terrible, actually. Right, and then this is my one pet peeve. I'm going to go off this because it's the one thing on transport that really annoys me is the UK government goes, we're not going to have any more petrol cars after 2030. We're going to move completely to electric cars. And you go, well, that sounds good, right? Because you get rid of the particulates in the air and the oxygen. That's great, right? You go, okay, how much energy does the UK need to power a UK car fleet? That's correct. 10% more energy than it currently has. Okay, so we need 10% more energy. Okay, how can the grid support that? No. Okay, so we can't. So at the very basic level, we can't support that. Okay, is there enough lithium in the world for the batteries needed to completely electrify? No. Okay, is there enough copper in the world to build, the wind farms, because we want to do it with sustainable technology and renewable energies. So, okay, we're going to build wind farms to get this extra 10% energy that the grid can't support, but hypothetically, maybe it could. Someone will solve that problem. Right. What does it take to build those wind farms? Well, we'd need the world's supply of copper for the year, just for the UK, to build and maintain those wind farms. So we'd need all the world's copper for the UK. No one else can have any, just the UK, so they can have a wind farm. Yeah. What about neodymium? We'd need 10 years of the world's supply of neodymium every year to power these ones. Great. Are these blades from the the wind farms? Are they recyclable? No, they're single purpose. You can't actually refurbish them. Okay, and how long do they last? 5 to 10 years. Okay, so we need all the world's neodymium for 10 years. I think they probably last a bit longer, but I would imagine there's a finite time. That's a bit I'm not 100% sure on, but it's going to be a finite amount of time, and then non-recyclable as we stand right now. So we're saying, we need more electricity than we can produce. Yep. And to produce electricity, we need sustainability. We need more of the world's critical raw materials than the world has. Yep. And we need all of them. Yes. Even though we can't have them. Yes. And we don't have enough lithium to make the batteries that allow us to have the cars to do this. Correct. What's the policy? Electrify the UK's car fleet by 2030. It's like, but I've just told you in 2022 that we don't have the energy. We can't make it with the mechanisms we've got in the world right now, and we can't make the cars. So we'll carry on. What's the policy? Get rid of petrol cars, have them electrified. And you're just like, okay, so that's someone smart, and maybe they're smarter than me. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I know how maths work. And like,
supply and demand.
If I had 5 apples and you want 50, I can't give you 50 apples. I can only give you 5. Stop asking me for 50. So like, on a basic level, this is why, my kid can educate the government because he understands this between 5 and 50. And that's a fundamental problem we've got with sustainability, that we've got these high ideas where someone's gone plastic straws, paper straws. We've got, no more super things, which I wouldn't be averse to. All electric cars can't do it. Solar energy in data centers, provides 1% of the energy. So your renewable policy, your environmental policy for data centers is to stick solar on. Great. How much energy can it provide? 1% of the total requirement.
What about the rest?
But that's your entire policy. Yeah.
The one that got me when I first met you, when you did that round table in Leeds, and again, the reason I invited you on today was because you speak with so much passion about this topic, and again, the education piece, you're so knowledgeable. You opened my eyes about like streaming, like the streaming thing blew my mind in terms of like, as opposed to just having your Blu-ray or your DVD versus, we don't think anything of it now. My children just Netflix or Amazon Prime or YouTube.
Disney Plus.
Constantly streaming. But just remind me like some of the stats on that, because the data centers to power those sort of is phenomenal.
It's not just the data centers, because we don't want to vilify data centers. They're providing a really good business need, and also investment in digital infrastructure repays on like return on investment like 14 times. So if you digitize, if you're investing in digital, you're making a significantly good business investment, but you must understand the cost of data. Because like you've just said with paper, well, paper's a physical thing. If I produce loads of waste paper, I can feel bad about that because I can see it. But if I produce waste data, I don't really see the environmental impact of that.
That's true,
and we consider it just on the data center. So, YouTube will come back and say, yeah, but we actually only produce 8 petabytes of data. That's not that much. Go, yeah, what does it take to transfer that around the world though through networks? Because there's a cost of transferring data. It's actually 150 times that. So they advise that they say, we're using this much energy to serve YouTube. It's like, you're not even remotely using that much energy, you're using 150 times that energy. And then the one I was talking to you about was understanding what role technology plays in consumption of data. So I use the example all the time of the Despacito video. I think that might be the one I talked about, where I used the Ronaldo one. They're both ones from Ravi Basharoush, who's been on Dispatches. He's a good friend of mine, and he's very, very smart. And he was talking about the Ronaldo one. This is one I've used years ago, and I've probably used it up now, but some people still haven't heard it. So at the time in 2020, whenever Ronaldo posted a picture on Instagram, it was consumed by his millions of followers, and then it comes onto to serve you that photo of a very small format. It was using like the energy consumption of 7 UK households for the year for that one photo at that one point in time for that one guy. And that's a single photo, and that was the Ronaldo example. And then Rabi did this wonderful piece on networks around the Despacito music video. Do you know the Justin Bieber?
You're going to start singing it?
I'm not, because I don't know it. I know it's something to do with Mexican food. It's something to do with burritos. But that used the energy consumption of 4 African countries for the entire year because it was the most streamed song. And we're not talking like Burkina Faso. We're talking like Sudan plus Central African Republic plus like, we're talking like 4 whole countries' energy consumption was for that streaming of that song. And all the big network players like YouTube came back and went, absolute fallacy. We used this much energy. And they went, agreed. You used 8 petabytes of data to stream that song, but that song is 4 minutes long. And if you turn that into data, that's say 800 meg. If you consume that in 4K rather than 3K rather than SD or whatever, there's a multiplier on that. So consuming data in SD versus HD is 3 times worse. So it uses 3 times more energy to serve you a HD video than an SD video. So if you're watching YouTube and you're watching a video on your phone, you don't, you're only listening to the music potentially, but you're watching it on YouTube, so you're getting streamed the video. You're listening to a song in your headphones and you're streaming it in like high definition to your phone, it's using like a gig of data. It's using a significant amount of data. Now you think the network effect, right? I'm consuming that data from a data center in Seattle. So it goes from Seattle to New York under the transatlantic cable to London or the Central Internet Exchange. Then it comes to me and does another hop to serve to me in Manchester before it gets to me in Leeds. So that hops through 5 different data centers. So if I'm using a content display network to receive that data quicker, then they have to replicate that data. So you're saying, yes, it's in my data center in Seattle, but now it's also in my data center in London. It's also in my data center in Manchester. And they're all going to store that data. And when they back up and replicate that data as part of their information security policies, they're going to offsite that data to 3 more locations as well. So that video that I was consuming in Seattle is in 12 locations.
Wow.
So you said it's 800 meg, but it's not. Because we've just agreed now it's 10 gig, right? And I've had to transfer it under these undersea networks. Also, how am I consuming it? 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi? Doesn't matter, right? Okay, so 3G is 4 times worse than 4G. So consuming it on 4G is okay. Consuming it on 3G, I'm using 4 times more energy. Consuming it on Wi-Fi, though, I'm twice as effective as 4G. So if I consume it on Wi-Fi, I'm 8 times better than 3G. That's pretty massive.
Yeah.
Phone, laptop, big screen, all have different energy uses for the consumption of that data.
Think about it, yeah.
And this is what we're talking about. We talk about data, and I know this sounds really complicated and I'm breaking this down, but fundamentally, that's where that data use comes from. You go, no, it's not 4 nations, it's this. Well, the network impact's 100 times that. And then you look at where's it been consumed. It's been consumed in Asia. Primarily, half the consumption of the 6 billion views is in Asia. Yeah. Right. Do they have 5G or 4G networks in most of Asia? No. Is Wi-Fi enabled in most of Asia or India? No. So what are they consuming it on? 3G. Okay, so we know 3G is 8 times worse, and they're using it on old devices that are less energy efficient on the whole, and it's had to go from Seattle to India and through all those hops to consume some song about burritos.
Wow. And this is all Justin Bieber's fault.
I'm going to blame him directly. It's a catchy tune, I'm told. But that's one piece. And we said, actually, if you put that into the data, the petabytes into data, and you burn them to DVDs, it would reach to the thermosphere. It would reach 30 miles. So when I first gave the analogy, I was like, I think it's like as high as the Eiffel Tower. And then I was like, I'm going to be the guy that does his homework. I'm a research focused guy. I believe in methodology. I'm going to do the homework. And it was like 30 miles high of DVDs. It reached the first satellites in Earth if we'd put that onto physical media for the consumption for that one song for 1 year.
Amazing.
Fascinating, right?
But presumably the world's getting more and more digitized, IoT, and we're mining for blockchain and all this stuff. That's increasing the energy consumption significantly, I'm assuming.
And we're getting better efficiency for the consumption, but we talked about the disproven of Moore's law earlier on. So we're saying, it's okay, we'll kind of work our way out of this situation by getting more efficient. Well, actually, we're consuming more data than ever, and our devices are not getting that much better at the actual energy efficiency piece like they were transformationally before. So we're creating this storm where we go, digital is good, and it is good. It's the underpinning of every part of the United Nations SDGs. Digital will help solve issues around sustainability, but we have to look at what responsible consumption looks like as well. And that's with consumer behaviors on buying crap, like my plastic toys for my son, and it's consuming data that I shouldn't really consume. I think what's that thing at the moment? They say at the moment there's stuff around like people having 3 sources of information most of the time all day. At home, that's you've got Alexa on, you've got the TV on with something that's been streamed, and you're playing on your tablet.
Honestly, my son does it. He puts the telly on and then he sits and watches. How are you doing that? The TV's on and the iPad. But then they're streaming it constantly. Literally, I'm like, no, get off that. But even going back to the toys the other day,
you're like, put that down, put that down. Like.
The only time that I sort of, because again, you sort of make sense of it when it piles up, is birthday. So in April, my daughter and my son, 10 days apart, the blue bin was just, again, gifts. It's just all the wrappers and all the plastic, and you're thinking, that's when it hits home, when you actually physically see it. But then again, like we've said with tech, sometimes you don't see the impact. And also we're marketed and sold to buy this fancy new thing, and we're told that it's more. And I think even with like TVs and whatnot, and electricals, when you go to Currys or AO or whatever, they've changed the banding, haven't they? Because they were, I think, I don't know what happened, but they were saying it was more energy efficient than it was, and then they've changed the structure of it, and all of a sudden it's like, well, actually, it's not so great.
The consumerism one's interesting because I actually did a podcast recently that they didn't publish because I went off on one about post World War II consumerism. Then World War II was when consumerism hit the mainstream because we'd created a wartime economy that led to the necessity to create GDP through consumption. So we created it will be the 40s, that in order to continue GDP at the rate we'd done and to grow as we had done as a wartime economy, we had to introduce consumption models that led to marketing, that led to where we are today. And that's why people are a bit like, well, this is kind of how people are. And it's like, well, actually, no. we've actually created a consumerism movement that's less than 100 years old.
Yeah, it is.
Wow. And you don't really think about it, do you? You go, well, what do you mean? It's like, well,
my granddad used to have a greenhouse, and he used to
grow his own
tomatoes and all his
TVs. When did you buy new TVs? When you were like in like this, 60s and 70s, when TVs were kind of like a thing, you repaired them, right? Repaired your TV, and we talk about right TV to repair as well shops. Around this sort of stuff, and it's coming back now. Repairing in product life extensions coming back.
We're not really old enough to remember, but John.
Wow. Well, I can remember on the subject, Steve. No, seriously, I can remember, my dad going to Radio Rentals, or I can't remember the other one at the time, Curry's or whatever, and we would rent it, and then it would be right. You hand it back. That would get pushed on to someone else, and then you get that. We'd rent it for like I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, and then suddenly, like you said, Rich, it kind of evolved to then say, well, I want to buy my own, and I'll keep it for a while, and then it will break, and I'll get it fixed. And I actually got a TV fixed, hold the phone, about 12 months ago for my son's bedroom. And to be fair, it might have been better
to buy a new one,
to buy a cheaper new one, sorry, let me rephrase that. Financially, it would have been probably more cost effective to dump it and go a new one. But because it was quite a big screen, my old lounge one, I thought, actually, do you know what? As long as it's not a bank breaker, I'll do it, because it would be great for his gaming and stuff like that.
And that's the problem. We were talking about legislation and the drive impact, and they still charge VAT on repairs. You're like, why? Like, if you removed VAT from repairs would be 20% cheaper.
Yeah.
And that decision then becomes easy to make, right? Well, actually, I'll pay to repair this because it's cheaper than buying new. When new is always cheaper than, repaired, then where is the economic incentive to be good?
That's a great point. It is a great point. But what I would say is, actually, back in my day, thanks, Steve, there were so many more repairmen for the various things, be it lawnmowers, be it whatever.
Washing machine, dishwashers,
exactly.
everything. Yeah.
There aren't now.
TVs,
but equally, digital has probably helped facilitate making those repairs yourself. I love iFixit. iFixit's just like, I've put a couple of videos up on that. But to be clear, I'm terrible with this sort of stuff. Working technology, I'm really good at research. I'm terrible with my hands. I'm just not good at this sort of stuff. And I look at the iFixit stuff and I go, this is how you fix your phone. This is how you fix. And I fixed my washing machine from watching iFixit.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Historically, would I have paid someone to drive out here, do the repair, paid a couple £100 or whatever, or would I just go, never mind, throw it away, get some scrap man to come and get it or whatever? Or would I watch iFixit and fix it? So that's when you're saying that's the driver that could be really effective. Can we disseminate education? Again, education. Can we disseminate education to allow you to facilitate your own repairs? And maybe that's why there's less repairmen. You know what I mean? So I know I'm playing devil's advocate.
I think that's fair, Rich, because I fixed the belt around. I never even knew a tumble dryer had a belt. I thought it was maybe a gear behind it. Anyway, there was a belt that drove the cylinder in the tumble dryer. It went, and I thought, couldn't find anyone to repair it. Actually, that was my first thing. And then I thought, iFixit, or Google iFixit comes up. Brilliant. All you need to do is get this. So eSpares, plug for them. Happy days. Next day, there I am in the garage, taking the top off. It's all falling apart. And I'm like, okay. And then managed to put it together. Works like a treat. And there was another one, sense of accomplishment. Actually, I haven't trucked it, but B, I've managed to fix something myself. B, and off we go. And I think that's it. But just going back to your research around data centers, because obviously what we've said is everything's moving to a data world, and you said something, I might be wrong, and you will correct me, please, but that something like the amount of energy that's used for data centers when it's, I don't know, I can't remember the stats, but it was basically along the lines of they could be way more efficient.
Yeah.
And I'm just conscious, how did you measure it? Not obviously the nuts and bolts of that, but how can we then go back and say, right, all these massive data centers, which I guess are popping up left, right, and center around the globe?
Well, it's not just massive ones. The problem is lack of data around how many data centers there are in general. We kind of cover the hyperscale ones, the Google, the Apple, the Amazon, all that sort of stuff. But micro data centers, edge-based data centers, there's millions. There's millions of these data centers, and every single one is just putting kit in and slinging kit in to run a role and they use the kit inefficiently because they don't know no better. And this is one we're talking about. What could people do? data centers are responsible for about 1% of the world's carbon, like energy and carbon.
And that's only going to grow.
Yeah, that's going to grow, but as they become more efficient, that number will probably stay in absolute terms. The 5G networks will become better, which means data transference will become more energy efficient as well. But it's only going to grow in the absolute numbers. Digital itself, I think, is responsible between 4 and 7% of world's emissions. So we talk about that's like home IT as well. That's like using your laptops. That's all this sort of stuff. So it's a huge part of what we do. I mean, it's up there with like, it's past what the airlines use. It's past aviation is what digital does in regards to environmental impact. Oh, way past that. It's cutting up to the point where it's getting close to like commercial fleet. Do you know what I mean? As in like transport sort of costs, because they're the big ones. Like agriculture, transport, and like business are the key sort of, but digital's built into the business numbers.
Sure.
So these are absolute numbers. They're fairly reliable. They're not mine. They're ones that I got from people that I trust, from big agencies that I do trust, not like a Deloitte or an Accenture, but from people that actually have no vested interest in these numbers. Provide the information. Okay, well, what could you reduce? Well, if people used Interact, and I'm going to plug my product in because I actually genuinely believe it's world changing. If every data center in the world used Interact, we could cut the global consumption of data centers from 1% of total energy to 0.5%. We could easily be 50% better. I've done 150 cases now with data centers ranging from massive ones to tiny ones, and the energy saved is on average 60 to 70% to run the same workloads at the same level of efficiency. So just with better configuration of kit, better understanding how to use the equipment. So there is a tool out there right now that could reduce the world carbon by 0.5%, or pretty much what the UK generates in the entire year. So we could make the UK zero carbon on a world level. And that is one technology for one area of a business. And I guarantee there's a million startups out there and a million businesses out there that solve problems like this that would make transformational change, and because they're not going to be accepted by risk-averse companies, it won't happen. The number of people that I deal with, and it's really forward-thinking businesses that'll go, I'll try what you're saying, mate. Oh, that's been transformational change. Thank you very much. But it's these businesses that you'd expect to be interested in what we do. But the majority of businesses are just like, nah, our IT team says it's a bit of a hassle. Don't want to do it. So you're telling me this guy's got a view that it might make his job a little bit harder for a week. So we're not going to change the world today. Thank you very much. And there's a million of those decisions being made every single day in all areas of the business. It's all about financial incentive to do the right thing. And there's one piece that I always harp on, which is fission. So energy, on making energy from energy. Okay. And so fission is, fundamentally like at the moment, it takes more energy to create the laser that can say split the technology to then create the energy than it does. Once we master fission, we have an abundant energy source that costs less to create than it generates. So we'll actually be able to create energy rather than transfer energy. There are about 50 companies that have got massive research grants, all investigating fission, all under NDAs, all not talking to one another. So you've got 50 companies with millions of, maybe £1 billion going into it worldwide, who are all trying to get a comparative commercial advantage in their creation of fission. And I guarantee they're all doing the exact same work or permutations of that work. If they actually shared that knowledge and combined it
quicker,
they'd get there faster because they'd learn we did this fission thing and it moved us ahead 10 years. They haven't done that yet, but they did something else that would have moved us ahead 6 months and solved a problem we just had. If that knowledge combined, we went, we've decided fission's good. Okay, great. World, and this is why we talk about global, exactly what you're talking about, it's a global problem. If everyone came together and said, right, F the money, let's look at the impact, we would solve it.
So there is no global leader, but let's say we live in a parallel world where Boris Johnson resigns and you get the gig. Yeah. I don't want you full policies, but
to sleep every night.
What are you doing? What's your top 3 things that you're going to do?
Sticking just to sustainability, because I'll be honest, although my background's economics, I'm probably not going to mess with those sort of policies. Yeah. So I'm going to stick entirely to what we do. I would incentivize investment in R&D that we share globally. So I would say that you produce something, a product, we trial it, we put it into incubators, we immediately share that knowledge, and we incentivize them financially to make it worth their while to share that knowledge. So rather than going, we'll try and smash a unicorn valuation, you get $1 billion. Yeah. Okay, well, that's really good. You've solved a massive problem there worldwide. How about everyone put some money in the pot? And you do quite well out of it. So it encourages you to get the bestest and brightest to do that. And we run it as a global scheme. The second piece be, I would aggressively penalize people that aren't actively reporting on environmental outcomes. And I mean aggressively penalize them. The threat of data was GDPR, wasn't it? Yeah, big fines. Yeah. I'd hurt people bad enough that they'd need to think about doing things right. Not stimmy business. I wouldn't want to be decreasing people's competitive advantage or anything. But I'd be saying, if you decide to say you're doing something environmentally focused or you've got an ESG policy, I'm going to ask you to prove that. Mm-hmm. And if you can prove it, we're all good. And I'm not going to tell you what those parameters look like. I'm just going to say, walk the walk.
Yeah.
You know, you want to talk the talk, that's cool. And I would financially penalise people that don't. And that's starting to happen now. I don't know if you saw Deutsche Bank have just been absolutely kicked in the swingers for all their stuff they're talking about, like in the term greenwashing. I'm going to get the whole thing without saying greenwashing, but I have to say it now because the Germans will love it. They've just been given a massive fine for inaccurate reporting on their environmental marketing. And there's another business, I can't remember who it is, but it's huge. Like it's a huge business who are also going through that themselves. So for all their marketing saying, we're great on this, we do all this sort of stuff, people looking at that and go, all right, show me. And they've gone, well, you can't. You know, they've gone, oh, we've got this great tree planting scheme. Awesome. Where have you planted them?
Yeah, where's that forest?
Well, they're in Scotland. Great. So you said that each tree is sequestering a ton of carbon a year. Yeah. Show me the saplings. Okay. Yeah, they do 27 kilos. So it takes 20 years before that tree that you've planted does a ton of carbon. So you can't write off a ton of carbon right now, can you? Because that's only doing 27 kilos.
It's kind of false advertising, really, isn't it?
It's a lie, is what it is.
Well,
and like I said, I'd love to say false advertising. You can get trading standards and be like, this doesn't do what it says it'll do. You said my car goes 100 miles an hour and it can't go out of first gear and do more than 3.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's what needs to happen. People need to go, what are you saying your product does? What are you saying you do? Show me, back it up and prove it.
Yeah.
And it's not actually that hard to do. Because what we see a lot of is carbon neutrality, where people go, well, offset.
Yeah.
You're not making yourself better. They're not reducing energy. They're just going to offset it. But the way they're offsetting it isn't sustainable. We're going to plant loads of trees. Wicked. Awesome. There's been a wildfire in America and it's wiped out 70,000 trees that you said you planted 3 years ago. Are you going to replant them 70,000 trees to sequester carbon that you wrote off 2 years? Are you not? So you didn't do anything then, did you? So actually you said you wrote off that carbon and then a natural disaster happened and you not fixed the problem. So actually what happened there was a gimme. You went, I've done it. Oh, it's been destroyed. Me calper. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not my fault. It's like, well, it really is your fault because that's how you solved your carbon situation. So you need to be
like that. And that's the thing, I think, Rich, you're right. Sadly, at the moment, it is gimmicky because there isn't that you at the top that's telling everyone, this is what I'm going to do and I will come after you if you say you do this and you don't do that. At the moment, it is a gimmick because when I was in the print and paper, print and publishing side of things, we're offsetting and we're doing all of that. And like you said, and then a natural disaster happens, it's like, well, I've said I've done it now, so we'll just move on. No one's going to pull me up.
And that's it.
That is.
Because if I said to you that there is a risk of tree planting, businesses are all about risk, right? Like the bigger businesses are all about risk and go, okay, so what's our plan? Our plan is to plant 50,000 trees a year. Wicked. What's the risk of planting them trees? Nothing, mate. We say we do it and everyone believes us. 0 risk. Love it. Thank you very much. What we said, well, the risk is that it's in a fire region. The risk is also that they don't reach maturity because it takes 10, 20 years to actually reach full carbon sequestration. The risk is that they don't actually do it and we don't actually check on it. Wow, that sounds pretty risky. What's the alternative? We could look at technologies that reduce our carbon output. Oh, let's do that. Let's just make less carbon. Then we don't have to plant the trees. Yeah, it might be cheaper to just plant the trees, though. Pretend we have. Wicked. Let's do that then. And that's the problem we've got to, is that someone at the decision making is going, what do we have to do? You have to say you've done something. Nice one. Let's say we've done it. Anyone going to check up on us? Nah. Wicked. Done. Job done. Put it in there,
Or some of them have, they'll donate it to a charity that says they're going to plant trees, and then the charity, they get a tax benefit because they've done it into charity, and then it's like, well, it's not my problem now. I've donated it to charity.
Yeah.
But the interestingly, you said about the chairmans, the one lady, when I did do a bit of a campaign around the plastic tax side of things, and she went for a chairman, food manufacturing company, massive 2 billion turnover, and when I mentioned about offsetting, straight away she said greenwashing. Straight away there was like, no, we've got a policy against this. I'm thinking, okay, so what are you going to do? But then, ironically, I said, okay, so how are you capturing the information now? Oh, well, we're printing out the paper and we're still trying to collate it on a clipboard and still having to type it into a spreadsheet type thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, it was interesting. Straight away, she was against the offsetting part of it, but
didn't have a plan B.
Yeah, didn't have a plan B. But then linking it back to some of the stuff that we do with the accounts payable side of stuff, we're seeing what people are buying. We're seeing the invoices come through. We're seeing what, and in the retail sector, I'm seeing things like Klarna, for example, have started to report on the carbon, or H&M were starting to give a carbon sort of footprint of that purchase. I'm like, okay. And that question that you answered, that sort of statement earlier was around how did they know? It's a complete finger in the air scenario, And one of my
looks good though.
Looks good, and then
good enough, right?
You talk about this competitive advantage and these auditors coming out of the woodwork, and yeah, I mean, I've spoke to a friend of mine, and he's trying to. He has an expense management business, and he's trying to make it more about accountable and okay, so you bought that product, what's your carbon footprint based on that, and then how do we actually accurately figure out that information? And a lot of the time, yes, you do have to sort of use some industry standard and best guesses and estimates and but then, okay, let's see if we can put a solution together where we actually do see it right through and actually provide proof that we've done it. And he's looking at trying to, if you do put the offsetting bit in place, invest it into a council-run project about, let's put it into council houses where we actually put insulation in the roofs and cavity wall and all this type of stuff to actually
building standards.
And raise this or moss walls but then actually, why do we not cut down them trees, like deforestation side of things? Like stop buying this side of things. So it's how it all links together, because ultimately
it's tricky, because we say for data centers, so we talk about systems of systems, and it's about making the right decisions. And I see a number of ones where it's like, right, we've built a data center and it's gonna have a living wall and it's gonna have a moat and it's gonna have like solar panels, and we're like, well, that's wicked. Have you looked at the IT hardware though to see if you could no, thank you. But that 65% of your energy draw is right there. Now we're good, mate. We've put flowers on the outside of the building.
That's the big takeaway for me is businesses, they focus more on offsetting what they're doing as opposed to actually changing the core of what they're doing. How they improve that.
Absolutely. And it's, I've got some stories I could tell you about like the government's approach to this, which sickens me when it comes to embracing these sort of technologies and just how bad procurement processes are to allow them to make good decisions. And this is for like the NHS, this is for the government, and I'm sure it's not just for sustainability, I'm sure this is for better financial management as well, and I hate to say this because I'm not anti-government or anything like that. I think like it's a hard job, just to be clear. I haven't got any political leanings, wouldn't want to do it. But there's a part of it where you go, inherent corruption in power leads us to make poor decisions. And I've seen that firsthand on multiple times. And I'm not allowed to talk about it because it's upsetting, but like solutions are there to solve problems that people want to solve, and you'll get blocked at procurement just going, we've got policy in place that says we can't do that. You can't do the right thing. We're literally not allowed to. And you're like, why not? And it's because someone's taken someone for dinner on their yacht in Monaco to watch the Grand Prix 6 years ago, and it's now part of our procurement processes. And that level of corruption is in every area of business. I'm saying government, but it's not just government. It's who you know in business as well, right? It's like, I'm not buying from these guys because I buy from my mate who actually gives me a bit of a side hand. Do you know what I mean? It's like, we see this all the time. That level of corruption is what is crippling us as a world. That's why we don't collaborate, right? Because we're worried that if we help somebody else, we give someone a foot up or a stand up, we're worried that they'll stand on our face. That lack of collaboration is what's killing us.
Brilliant point to end on. So I just want to say thank you very much for your time. It's been an incredible podcast. I've loved listening to you. So thank you for taking the time to join us.
It's really nice. Thanks, guys.